Thanks, Lisa and Sam. It's a big passage that we're looking at today. Before I get started, just a little reminder, if you are streaming this service, then please put any questions that you have in the Facebook comments. But it's also an option for you guys here in church. If you have questions and you don't want to talk to me individually after the service and ask them, then you can put them on the comments of Facebook too. The Facebook app, just write them in and I will see them in that last song, and if there's a question that I need to address, and hopefully I will if you ask it, then I'll come back up and quickly answer your question. If you're watching this on YouTube, put your questions in the comments section and I will answer them in that way as well. Okay, with that, let us pray. Dear Lord, thank you for this time. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for the technology that allows this to go to others who are not here today. Lord, we ask that your Spirit will be present. We ask, Lord, that you will speak clearly through me, but we also ask, Lord, that you will engage our minds, that you would show us your truth, that you would tell us something, teach us something, train us in some way this morning. Lord, do your work amongst us today. In your name, amen. Often when you have, in pop culture, a group of people trying to achieve a goal or an quest or an adventure of some description, each of those people will have a specific gift, ability, or power. And it's only through using all of the gifts or abilities of the whole crew combined that the quest will be able to be achieved, that the adventure will be done. So I'll give you an example of this. In James Bond, James Bond is a fantastic field agent. He's great for the action, but James Bond needs M to give him the leadership and the intelligence. And he needs Q to give him the nifty little gadgets that gets him out of trouble, like a pen that explodes, or a briefcase that explodes, or a car that explodes. He needs all of that to achieve the task, but each individual only has power or ability in one specific area. We see this in the role-playing game Dungeons and Dragons. You have a group achieving a quest, and you have a barbarian who's really good at melee combat, and you have a ranger who's really good at archery, long-distance combat, and you have a wizard for magic, and you have a bard who sings songs. But each of them has this particular gift in one area. I'm currently playing Super Kirby Clash on the Switch. And in this game, you have 4 different characters. And you have the blade hero who's sword and he's all about agility. And you have the hammer who's all about power. And you have the mage who's long distance weapon. And you have the healer who heals. Each of these guys have one specific gift or power, and they utilize that as a group to achieve the task. But then when we come to Jesus, and we come to this passage, these 4 different miracles, he is showing that he has the power not in just one area, but in all areas. He can't just heal the sick, but he also has power over design, creation. I wanted to keep my D's. He has power over demons. He has power over disease. He has power over death. Jesus doesn't need anyone else. He has all the power in himself. Power over everything. Power over multiple areas. He is the all-in-one combo. He's the Daisy version of the Swiss Army knife. He has power over everything. So that's kind of what we see in this chapter, in this passage. Now I'm attempting to cover a lot today. If you're paying attention during the Bible reading, it's really long and we're trying to do a lot. But there's 4 different miracles we're trying to cover today. As a result, I won't be able to go in depth in all of them. The reason we're doing this is for 2. One, so that we can kind of shorten our time in Luke. Otherwise, it will literally take us 3 years. But a lot of people do this over 3 different sermons. The other reason is you can actually see a linking theme of power and faith throughout these passages. And so they go together quite neatly. So, the other thing though that we get here is that Jesus has been preaching. So you've got the Sermon on the Plain, and he's been talking about the parable of the sower. And now here in action, Luke is showing Jesus authenticating his ministry. I've said I am all these things. Now let me show you that I am these things. By these actions that show that I have power over everything. That I am who I said I am. So we come to the first miracle. Jesus calms the storm. Jesus goes for a boat trip to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, And then we see in verse 23, as they sailed, he fell asleep. A squall came down on the lake so that the boat was being swamped and they were in great danger. Now, the Sea of Galilee isn't actually a sea, it's a lake. It's a lake that is below sea level with high cliffs. As a result, wind would come off the mountainsides and into the lake and whip up a massive windstorm. And so this lake, you would often get this to happen. And it could get really bad, as it did here. Now the next is, the NIV has that the boat was being swamped. Other translations saying that the boat was drowning. So you get the idea that water is actually coming into the boat. And Jesus is still sleeping. And the winds don't wake him, and the waves don't wake him, and the water doesn't wake him. It requires a disciple to shake him to wake him. And I'm like, I am like Jesus in the way that we sleep. Because when I sleep, the smoke alarm does not wake me. that has been proven. But what can wake me is a child really just basically tackling me on my bed in order to get me awake. And that's kind of the situation here. The disciples have had to physically wake Jesus because he wasn't being woken otherwise. So verse 24, the disciples went and woke him, saying, Master, Master, we're going to drown. Now, you have to remember that amongst the disciples, there were experienced fishermen. These guys knew their job. They had been on this particular sea their whole life. That was their career. They knew what to do in the storm. But even this storm is so big and so scary that even they are going, we're going to die now. And I like that as well. They don't wake Jesus and don't say, hey, Jesus, can you save us? Jesus, can you do something here? Jesus, we know that you have the power of God in many different areas. Do some of that God stuff now. They don't do any of that. They do, Jesus, we're going to die. Jesus, you might want to, it's been great knowing you. It's been great working with you, but we're going to die now, so goodbye. I just think, the last 2 minutes of your life, you'd like to be conscious, you can say your last prayers now. Even in that action, the disciples are showing that they don't get who Jesus is. If they knew who Jesus is, they knew what he could do, they knew they weren't going to die at that moment. But again, they're showing that they really don't get it. So Jesus gets up and rebukes the wind and the storm. Verse 24b, he got up and rebuked the wind and the raging waters. The storm subsided and all was calm. They heard the words of Jesus and they obeyed. Calm, still, clear skies, no rain, no danger. The NIV uses the term rebuked them. It's like he's getting angry at them for waking him up. It's like, guys, you did not do that. Wind and waves, you did not just try and kill me. Do you know who I am? And the waves are going, no, sorry, I didn't know you were in the boat, Jesus. I'm so sorry. Cyril the squaw, did you know that Jesus was in this boat? That's it, you're on time out, my friend. Look, many apologies, Jesus, I'm sorry. We'll never do it again. Until that time where you walk on water. But we'll be a lot less that time, okay? Look, I promise. You kind of get this idea that, now, of course, the wind and the waves, don't talk. They don't have personification. They don't have minds. They do not think. They do not have ears. They do not make decisions. But even the deaf and dumb creation do what God says. And in that way, the waves and the wind is doing something that often smart people don't, in hearing the word of God and obeying it. Well, Jesus then turns his attention to the disciples. Now, where is your faith? He asked his disciples. Verse 25. In fear and amazement, they asked one another, who is this? He commands even the wind and the water, and they obey him. And part of this, even if nature obeys God, does anyone else have more power? If creation obeys, who could possibly not obey? Who would not obey this one? Jesus again reveals a little bit more about who he is in this incident. He shows that he has power over creation. A God-like power because he is actually God. And the disciples in their response show that they have no clue, no idea of who this guy actually is. They say, who is this man? We've been following this guy for a long time now. We've seen him do great things, but what even creation does it? This is insane. Who are we actually following here? Jesus, in this miracle, shows that he has power over design, power over creation, and it makes sense because he created it. Well, then we get the next miracle. You get the idea that the story continues, that this incident takes place right after the boat and the calming of the waves and the wind. The boat pulls in at a place called the Gerasenes. Now, Matthew actually uses a different word for it, uses Gerasenes, and that's because there is debate as to where this actually is. But most of the commentators say that it's in the southwest corner of the Sea of Galilee, and as such, it is Gentile land. This is not where the Jews live, this is where the Gentiles live. And so this is a completely different audience that Jesus is now coming to. There, Jesus is met by a demon-possessed man. And that's worth sitting with alone, because this man was possessed by a demon. And we don't like to think that that's still possible. We don't like to think that that's part of our reality, and yet the Bible says it is, and so therefore it is. We leave demon possession for scary movies and entertainment and horror films. We don't embrace it as part of our world, but yet this is what the Bible is saying, that it is possible, that it does happen. And then verse 27b. For a long time this man had not worn clothes or lived in a house, but had lived in the tombs. 29b kind of encourages and continues with that. Many times it, the impure spirit, had seized him, and though he was chained hand and foot and kept under guard, he had broken his chains and had been driven out by the demon into solitary places. So this guy is naked. The demons wouldn't allow him to wear clothes. What's next is he wasn't living in houses, he was living in tombs. Now this is again a weird image for us. It's not as if he was in a cemetery and dug down and opened a casket, got rid of the body and lived in the casket like Dracula. That's not the idea here. Remember, the tombs were cut like little caves into the hillside. What happened was dead bodies were put into those tombs until the body deteriorated, then the remains were put in a jar or some other holding vessel and then taken out and taken back to the family's home. So there wouldn't necessarily always be something in that tomb. As a result, that's kind of where he's hiding, in these little underground caves where dead people were going to go, but not necessarily were there yet. At least not the ones that he stayed in. The next thing about this man is that he had supernatural strength. He had the power through the demons to break physical chains. And that's really interesting as well, because it shows that the supernatural powers can have physical strength, can have a physical effect on our reality. The man didn't have the strength to break the chains, but the demons gave him that strength and enabled him to do that. And that says something about the supernatural power that is real in the world that we currently live in. Then you get the idea. Verse 28. When he saw Jesus, the man, he cried out and fell at his feet, shouting at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, don't torture me." Now, the idea here is that the man is not saying it, but rather the demons inside him are saying it, because the demons have knowledge that the man did not possess, and that is the identity of Jesus Christ. Also, what we see here is the demons call Jesus the Son of the Most High God. That is the closest anyone has got so far in the book of Luke of identifying the true nature and character of Jesus. The demon was able to give him the title that no one else had stumbled upon yet. And that's because the demon had this spiritual knowledge from the spiritual realm and was able to identify Jesus as who he really was. Son of the Most High God. Then Jesus talks to the demon. Jesus asked him in verse 30, "What is your name?" "Legion," he replied, because many demons had gone into him. Now, legion is a Latin term known for a group of soldiers that would be around 6,000 Roman soldiers. Now, the term, it wasn't always the same. It wasn't a centurion was always 100. Legion could have been more than 6,000. And so the theme here isn't the push on the exact number of the demons, but rather it's to say that there is a lot. A lot of demons have come and possessed this man. And then it's worth noting that this then puts this event on a different level. See, Jesus had exorcised a demon before, but that was 1v1. Now, with the recognition that this is a legion of many demons, this is 1v thousands. And just as Jesus had power over one demon, Jesus also had power over thousands of demons. Even when he's gained up on, it doesn't matter because Jesus is more powerful than demons. Jesus is more powerful than all the demons. So he can easily take care of this crew. And that's what he does. Verse 31. And they begged Jesus repeatedly not to order them to go into the abyss. When I was reading verse 28, and the demons say to Jesus, "Don't torture us," I was thinking, whoa, can Jesus even do that? Does Jesus torture demons? And what would that look like? What is a spiritual version of waterboarding? That's really confusing, right? But that's not what is being referred to here. Jesus wouldn't torture, at least not in the way that we see. What the demons are referring to is the torment or the torture of being in the abyss. What they are saying is, don't send us into the abyss. Don't torture us in the abyss. Please let us, at least for now, escape that danger. But then the question is, well, what is the abyss? Some translations have the term hell instead of here. And it was referring to the prison for evil spirits and for the dead. The Greek term is also used in the Greek version of the Old Testament for the concept of the deep. Or where the depths of the sea, which is interesting. The water thing comes in again with the pigs. But the idea here is that it is where Satan, in the book of Revelation, it is where Satan is bound during the millennium. However you understand that. The idea is that this is where Satan and his demons will be punished. And that is what they're asking not to go into. That's where they don't want to be. So then Jesus sends them out and gives them permission to go into the pigs. The demons were definitely coming out of the man, but where they went was a question in debate, and so Jesus allows that to happen. Now, for Gentiles, the idea of someone farming pigs is absolutely revolting. Pigs were an unclean animal. They would not have anything to do with pigs. They would never eat pork, and therefore they were missing out on the many joys of bacon. But they weren't allowed that. And so for them to think of someone farming pigs is a little bit like when you go to Southeast Asia, and there's these markets where you can eat live cockroaches and tarantulas, they exist. And to us in the West, we think that is revolting. The only reason I would ever do that is if I was a contestant on The Amazing Race. That is it. That's the only reason, right? But that was that same revolt idea is what Jews would have had for this concept of pig farmers. But because we're in a Gentile land, then it was a completely respectable and legitimate way of making a living. Now, Jesus then sends the demons into the pigs, and through the Gospel of Mark, his version of this story, we have the idea that it's roughly about 2,000 pigs, or somewhere in that being. And so that is a lot of pigs. The demons are cast into the pigs go crazy and then just run off a cliff into the water. And it's interesting, the demons are asking not to be sent to the abyss, which has this concept of the deep water. And here, they end up in deep water. They run and they drown. Now this raises a whole heap of questions that the Gospel of Luke doesn't seek to answer. Questions like, how can animals be possessed? Why would Jesus allow such a use of animals? What happened to the demons when the pigs died? Why did the spirits feel compelled to dwell somewhere? All really good questions, but not ones that Luke answers or is striving to answer. And so I'm not going to waste our time theorizing on it because the Gospel doesn't answer those questions. But it is worth noting that for Jesus, the person of the demon-possessed man, he is more important than the 2,000 pigs. Now again, you get the idea. Jesus isn't casting those pigs into the sea, but rather the demons kind of raise up this panic and frenzy in the pigs, which leads to that action. Okay, So the pig farmers, who weren't the pig owners, they go into the town and countryside and say what has happened. And a whole heap of people come out of those towns to see what actually took place, if this is actually a true story. And they come and they see Jesus sitting with a demon-possessed man who is no longer demon-possessed, who is in his right mind, who is wearing clothes for the first time that anyone can remember. And he is speaking normally. He is himself again. And the crowd, seeing this, are scared. They're afraid. They're fearful. They're freaking out. Because the demons were a power that they do not know how to control. And Jesus is stronger and more powerful than the demons. Whoa, 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 whoa. We didn't know what to do with that guy. We tried to chain him up. That didn't work. We cast him out here and we just tried to pretend he didn't exist. But now you are even stronger than that? No, you got to go. We don't want a part of you. And then also part of that is the death of the 2,000 pigs was such a high cost that they were more concerned about the material loss than the spiritual gain that they could have got through Jesus Christ. Again, because they're a Gentile town, chances are they didn't know who Jesus was, they hadn't heard rumors, they didn't have the background of the Old Testament because they wouldn't have read it, so they didn't get who Jesus was when he came to their shores, and they sent him away. But it's interesting when you look at the man's response. The man kind of goes up to Jesus, a rabbi, a teacher who changed and transformed his life. And he goes, let me come with you. And Jesus goes, no. You go into all your towns and villages and you tell them what God has done for you. And in one way, he is the first Gentile missionary in the Bible. Because he goes back into his own town and tells about what Jesus has done. And that's also interesting. Because when we get to Jairus, Jesus tells the parents of tells Jairus and his wife not to tell anyone. And so isn't that weird? Sometimes Jesus says go and tell, and sometimes Jesus says don't go and tell. And there is no cookie cutter for what God is calling you to do. God isn't calling all of us to do the same thing. There's no one fits all size like a cap that you wear. No. God will call one person to do one thing and another person to do another thing, and that is part of his plan. And therefore, when God doesn't call me to do something he calls someone else to do, we shouldn't be desire of that. Instead, we obey the calling of God on our life. Alright, so in that, then God has power over design and creation. Now we've seen that God has power over demons, and some of you are freaking out because that means we are over halfway with 2 miracles to go. I wanted to spend more time on the demons because that's where all the questions are, okay? So then we get the power over disease. Jesus comes back to Capernaum and normal crowds are eager to see his signs and wonders. And Jairus, the synagogue ruler, comes to him and asks to come to his house because his daughter is sick and dying. But on the way, and Jesus goes, yeah, I'll come, because remember, if you invite Jesus, he will say yes, and he does. And so Jesus is on his way to Jairus' house when this event happens. Verse 42b. As Jesus was on his way, the crowds almost crushed him. And a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years, but no one could heal her. She came up behind him and touched the edge of his cloak, and immediately her bleeding stopped. The woman was bleeding. Now literally it has a flow of blood. But it's most likely that this is referring to a uterine hemorrhage. That is, she was bleeding out of her vagina. Now remembering that she was a Jew, this would have made her ceremonially unclean. And if she touched someone, they would also be ceremonially unclean. As a result, she lived her life in a perpetual state of not being able to touch anyone, of being a social and religious outcast, of not being able to participate in the religious life of being a Jew. No one would go near her, no one would touch her, and she wasn't allowed to do any of the things a normal Jew would do. This was a horrible situation. And what's more is, it was really embarrassing. And she had gone to seek help. She had seen all the doctors or medical professionals at that time, but no one could help her, even though she spent all her money on it. So it's embarrassing for her, and that's why she didn't publicly approach Jesus, but instead just touched the edge of his cloak. I play tips with my kids sometimes. And what happens is, in our family, we don't play the you can't tip the butcher back rule because there's like 3 of us. And so you have to tip someone. But often what happens is they'll be running away and you tip them on the shirt, but they won't feel it on their actual body because you don't get the flesh, right? You just get the shirt. And you go, I tipped you. And they go, no, you didn't tip me. Oh, I got your shirt. No, I didn't feel it, but I still tipped you. Oh, Mom. That's normally how it goes in our family. And that's me talking. So you got the idea that she didn't actually physically touch his skin, but rather just touched his cloak, just the clothes. Like in tip, it wouldn't have counted. And even that was able to heal her. And even then, Jesus knew someone had touched her. Verse 45, who touched me? Jesus asked. When they all denied it, Peter said, Master, the people are crowding and pressing against you. I love that. Who touched me? Like Peter's looking around. I love this picture, right? Because that's kind of how it would have been. The crowd was crushing him. And you have to look at the picture carefully to see the woman reaching up to touch his cloak. Jesus says, who touched me? Peter's going, dude, everybody touched you. You've been touched by like 15 people right now. It's like, Jesus, there are more people here than outside, than at a toilet paper trolley in Coles in the middle of lockdown. There are more people here than in a queue for Audi in the middle of lockdown. There are more people here than lined out in the pub as restrictions were eased after lockdown. There's a lot of people here, Jesus. I have no idea who touched you. In verse 46, but Jesus said, someone touched me. I know that power has gone out from me. The woman gets that she is found, and she's a little surprised that Jesus knows, because she's really trying to get away with it. But she's also surprised that she has been immediately healed and the bleeding has stopped. She came and trembling falls at his feet, and that is a continual theme of these passages as well. Because we saw this, Jairus fell at his feet, men, demon-possessed fell at his feet. And we saw this before, that other people fell at his feet. Jesus has many people falling at his feet in submission, because they do that, because they get some glimpse, some shred of who he actually is. So she comes up and tells him what is wrong, and this would have been humiliating and pride-swallowing, because she did this in the presence of all the people. It's like those people who go on odd bodies. Like, why would you tell everyone that you have that issue? And that's kind of what she's doing. She doesn't want to do this, but Jesus has healed her, and so she does. The woman must have been thinking, how will Jesus react? Is Jesus going to be angry? Is he going to be like that I tried to sneak off with his power? Like, is he going to take the power away? Like, what's he going to do? And of course not. Jesus says, your faith has healed you. Go in peace. Again, it shows the heart of Jesus that he cares for people, and we've seen that all the way through this series of the week. He cared for the widows, for the widow when her son died, and he cares for this woman now. He cares. But it also shows that Jesus has power over disease. He has power over design and creation. He has power over demons. He has power over disease. But there's one more area. So he continues, when he does this, as soon as he finishes, someone comes up to Jairus and says, don't bother the leader anymore because your daughter has died. I'm like, how harsh is that? Like, he's more concerned about the teacher's time than the fact that this guy's just lost his daughter. But Jesus goes, no, I got this. Just trust me and believe, and continues to go to Jairus' house. He gets there, and he only allows the parents and his top 3 disciples to come into the room with him. I always wondered what that was, but it's most likely linked to the fact that he didn't want many people knowing about this, as he tells Jairus and his wife not to tell anyone about the miracle. So verse 45, he goes to the child and goes, my child, get up. And then her spirit returned, and at once she stood up. So she was actually dead, because her spirit returned to her. So there was a time that her spirit was not there. And the girl gets something to eat, proving that she is actually alive. And when Jesus tells the mourners that the girl is not dead but asleep, they laugh at him. But again, Jesus puts his actions where his mouth is. And again, he is able to resurrect the dead. Like he did with the widow's son, so he does with Jairus' daughter. And it shows Jesus has power over the dead. In this sequence of design, demons, disease and death, death is kind of the epitome. Death is the last one in this series. It's okay if you cry, it's fine. Death is the last one in this series, and in that he's kind of saying this is the epitome of my power, because I have here defeated death, and in my death on the cross I again would defeat death, and it's showing his power. Well, these events then, another brick in the wall of the identity of Jesus. Remember, that's a key theme for Luke. He's trying to identify and show the nature and character of Jesus Christ, and show it through these stories. And then this sets up the confession that we will see in chapter 9. Luke here is building the story of Jesus. And in these events, it highlights his authority and it highlights his power. And also, you get the idea that everyone else gets who Jesus is other than his disciples, other than the crowds around him. Well, wind and waves, they know who he is because they stopped as soon as he stepped. The demons, they get who he is because even though there's thousands of them, they immediately go to where he allows them to go. The disease knows who Jesus is. Our biology knows who Jesus is because it does what he says. And uterine hemorrhage healed itself because of the power of God. The death knows who he is because death released the daughter's grasp, released the daughter from his grasp at the words of Jesus. Everyone else knows who Jesus is. But the humans don't get who Jesus is. Often we don't get who Jesus is. And even if we are a Christian, we show that we don't get who Jesus is by our actions. We don't obey him like we should. We don't follow him like we should. We don't believe he has the power to do things. At least we don't show that confidence in our life as we should. We often don't get who Jesus is. Luke has these 4 miracles all together for a purpose: the nature and character of Christ, one who has power over everything. And the goal is to show us who Jesus is, who we are following. And if we got that, then it would change often how we live our life, because we would live the Christian life with more confidence, with more certainty. If I had Andrew Trance's not here, but he's a basketball coach, and I forgot what age group it is, but let's say it's under 10s, right? And he's got this group of under 10s, and let's just say he has LeBron James on his team, like an adult LeBron James. It happens to be, there's some technicality of the rules allows an NBA player to play with the under 10s. And so in this comp, Andrew has his crew, and then there is LeBron James. And you've got to be thinking, well, it doesn't matter how scary the opposition is. It doesn't matter that if they have monographs. It doesn't matter if they've never lost a game. It doesn't matter if there's one kid who in an under 10 is starting to grow a mustache. It doesn't matter about any of that because we got LeBron James. Like, we're not going to lose this game. We got LeBron. Like, if we lose, it's because he allows us to lose. And LeBron James knows a lot more about basketball, so he's got some, like, major plan in his head, some strategy he's formed that's going to make us win in the end anyway, so that's fine. We don't have to worry about them because we got him. As Christians, we often face the difficulties and the problems and the obstacles in our life, and we're scared of them, and we're going, oh, this is too big for us. We're forgetting who we've got in our team. If you don't know who LeBron James is, just change him for Michael Jordan if you're slightly older. As Christians, we have Jesus on our team. Jesus who has power over everything, and that must give us a confidence in the Christian life in which we live. And then when we face the trials and obstacles, we must continue to remember who's on our team. And if he doesn't win that particular battle for us, then he's playing like 3-dimensional chess. He's got a plan that we will eventually win, and we know that because the Bible promises it. We have one on our team who has power over everything. How does that change how we live? Please will you pray this. Dear Lord, we thank you for this opportunity again. We pray, Lord, that you really impart on us who Jesus Christ is. How him in totality, his power over everything. And allow us, Lord, to live our Christian life in light of that, with that confidence that there is nothing that you cannot be. Show us how that can make a difference in our life, we pray. In your name.